we were in here, and let's start code. We'll see how I do, since y'all have gone code.
Oh yeah, you're going code now.
I'm gonna give it a try.
Did you put the Vim extension in there already? Did you put the Vim extension?
Yes. Oh, the Vim extension has been in there for a while. Yeah.
Can you ask Mark if you can turn off those pop-ups?
Is that?
Can you ask Mark about those pop-ups?
No, I'm going to though.
Those are so
I wish
frustrating.
they were like kind of transparent, or if they were like context sensitive. They just need to be like down and away, so I can still see around the code directly on top of where the code is. Oh, I think I need to install. Yeah, it's weird, and I love it because like the documentation is so good. Like you write a function and it shows you the documentation. That's awesome. But please don't show it to me like right on top of where I'm trying to write my codes. Okay, cool. So let's go over what our app looks like. So here's our app. Let me get rid of this now that I know it's called the activity bar. Thank you very much. Okay, so here's our app. So one thing I do, and this I think will help you, is that when I go to look at a React app, I mainly go to find the app component, like whatever the top level things. I go look at this render. That's where I start, right? Because that's where the content's going to be. So to get back in our brains where we were, we have our app. Our app has a header that's got some text and a button we have to deal with eventually. We have a list. That list is getting some items and a complete item. I don't know what those are, but I know a list takes some items. That seems reasonable. And list takes something called complete item. That kind of sounds like an action. Cool. And there's a footer. All right, cool. Let's go take a look at the list. So even before I go look at what the state is, I'm going to go look at what the component does. So the component for our list is a unordered list that takes whatever the items property is and maps each of those items into whatever render item returns. And render item just returns an item. Cool. And it provides an ID, a text, a complete, and a complete item. Cool. Let's go look at what an item is. An item is an LI that's a checkbox input, some text, an edit button, and a delete button. And now I kind of understand at least the structure of the page, right? So I'm going to flow through an app that way. When I look at your homeworks, that's what I look at. Find the render, what does it render, what does it do, what does it do, what does it do, all the way down, looking through those things. And then I've got a choice, right? Do I look at the lowest level component and see how it works, or do we start from the top and work my way down? I don't know if there's really good guidance one way or the other between them. I'm going to start from the bottom and work my way up, because I think that typically since events work their way back up, I want to see like where the action is happening, right? So I saw that there's an on change here on the checkbox. It calls this.complete item. Complete item is a function here that calls this.props.complete item, passing it the ID. Cool. So that must have come from my parent. So that was the list. How does that get passed down? That gets passed down from here. So the item gets an item ID, an item text, an item complete, and a props that is this complete item. The item came from here, which came from this.props.item. So this.props.items must be a list of items, and we're turning them into items one at a time. To see where this.props.complete item comes from, I've got to go all the way back up to the app. Aha! This.props.complete item comes from the app's complete item function. What does it do? It does a put against an API, giving it an item with a complete true, and then when it's done, it refreshes all the items from the API. What does that do? Oh, it just gets from the API and sets the item state. So the items must be the response from the API. I could go look at an example API response and go, oh, that's what's in items, and see how it flows all the way down. So when you're looking at an existing React app, or you're looking at one of your own, right, you kind of have to look at it at two directions at once, right? Watching state and props flow down and the events flowing back up. So you've got to kind of look at it from two directions. let's do some cleanup stuff before we tackle what we want to tackle, which is being able to uncheck one of these checkboxes. So the first thing that I see is this .complete item is just calling this .props.complete item, passing it this. So we don't really need, actually we do need that. I take that back. We do need that because I don't want to show you binding. Let's go to the list. This is the second thing I saw. So remember at first we pulled out the rendering of that big complicated li into a function. Well, now all this does is return an item. So why don't I just take this and put it here? I don't need a function for it. Yeah, it's just, I don't need another function that's just going to return the same thing that it would have done otherwise. We don't need this console logging. And I think we've got some console logging here. So we can turn some of that console logging off. Cool. Let's figure out how to make this check do both checking and unchecking. Right, so inside of complete item, let's console.log the event target. So remember the event target is going to be the thing that was clicked. Let's put this on the bottom. Let's go to the console and let's click on this guy. Except, let's just log the event because I want to be able to show you the details of the item. And I think if I log the item like that, it's just going to give me the HTML. So here's the event, and here's the target. Let's try this again. Here's the event. Why is my event target null? See, if I'm logging the event target, what I'm getting is just a DOM thing. And I want to be able to show you the checked. Okay, so what we want to be able to do is if we click on an item and it's checked, right? This item is checked. But if we click on one down here, it's not checked. So what we want to be able to do is look at that checked attribute. So let's look on MDM and see if we can figure out, nope, that's Zool, that's not what we want. We want HTML, it's this one. We want to know whether or not an item. So common supported attributes is checked. So this says we should be able to say something like let is already checked equal to the event target checked. And let's console log that. Is already checked. What happened to autocomplete? So now if we click on something like this one, that's false. That's true. Because it's what it's logging what it's becoming, right? If I right, because it's already unchecked it and it's telling me that it's changed. So let's call this like new complete status. New complete status. This is frustrating me because my little Vim autocomplete isn't working either. So now I can tell whether or not we want to say if this is complete or not complete. So this should say false, and this should be true. Am I going to tell the API this is becoming complete or becoming incomplete? So we want to be able to send this up to the parent. New complete. That's going to be really frustrating. New complete status. So we're going to pass to complete item two things, the ID and whether or not it should be complete or not. So if we look up in the app, here's complete item. Now this needs to take two things. Let's call this complete status. And all I have to do is replace this with complete status. Right? I get all the way down here in the list, all the way down here in the item, I figure out whether or not the thing is checked. Right? And I pass that up to my complete item, and I pass it in. So this should uncheck it, and this should check it, and this should uncheck it. Right? And now I'm checking and unchecking things. I am.
So you call complete status what now?
So complete status is whether or not the thing I just clicked on is checked.
Oh, okay.
So I'm asking, so what's happening is when I click on this checkbox, the checkbox is going away and then I'm being called. So I'm asking what's the current status of that checkbox? So if it's unchecked, it must be because the user just unchecked it. So this is what new check status is going to be. All right, new complete status is going to be the user just affected this checkbox. What is it now? All right, and it's going to be unchecked. And I pass that up as the second argument to complete item. So the complete item is the ID, and what do you want the complete status to be? And rather than hard code complete to be true, I just tell it whatever it is. So the API is getting, if we looked in our network inspector, let's go look at our network inspector. Let's check Matt Schwartz. Okay. So here you can see, here's our 247. Let's look at the payload. The payload is item complete true. You can kind of see down here at the bottom. Right? If I click on it a second time, item complete false. Okay. We're just toggling that on, and we're toggling that off. On and off, on and off, on and off. There's a little bit of a lag, right? Because we're sending the API request and we're requesting the entire screen again. That's fine. Let's go implement delete. One list API. So here's a delete. So hey, here's removing an item. It uses the delete verb. That's kind of handy. And we just send that request to items ID, and we use a delete that should delete that element. This should be straightforward. Let's see if it is. So here's our delete button. Let's say on click is this dot delete item. Let's add a delete item function. Takes an event. And inside of here, let's say console.log going to delete. Right? I like to check to see if the thing is going to do the thing before it does the thing. Right? So I'm going to do a console log and see if I come to my console and delete this. Yes, delete, delete. It's going to delete. Let's also add in this.props.id. Because I'm going to need to know which thing I'm deleting. Deleting 246, deleting 267, deleting 273, deleting 2403. Awesome. Let's come up to the app, and let's add a delete item function. It's going to take an ID, and it's going to be a lot like this one, except it's going to be .delete. And we don't need these options. Right? There are no extra arguments to it. It's just the delete. And when we're done, we're just going to get the items again from the API. So our item should call this.props.delete item, this.props.id. So this implies that our list is going to need delete item. Delete item is this.delete item. So let's pass that function down to our list. And then let's have our list pass that down to our item. Right? Defining a function at the top, passing it down from parent to child to child to grandchild until we get to the component where we need it, and then we call it. So let's see if this is working. Let's delete whatever. Let's delete test. Let's delete test 1.
That's completely gone from the API, right?
It's gone from the database.
Database.
Yep. Yep, it's gone from the database, which means if we reload the page, right, those items are never coming back. Cool. That's delete. Let's do add. Then we're gonna come back and do edit last. So what was your all's idea for add? When you click on add, what was supposed to happen?
I brought up an alert
Okay.
because all you're asking for is a string, and so there should be an input field on the alert. Hey, whatever you want to add to the list.
Cool. Let's see what happens. So here we could say on click is this dot add item, kind of following this complete item, delete item, add item. So you're saying if we do an alert, what is your new item? Let's see how that works. Except we needed to say not an alert, I think it's called prompt.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Right now.
I think it's called prompt. I haven't used it in forever. Let's see if I was right. Yep. Blarg. Let's see if we say let text equal to this, and let's console.log the text. All right, so let's prompt for something. So let's add blarg. Oh, with an at.
With the add.
Blarg at. Cool. There's our text. So how does creating an item work? Let's find out. Where is one list that's over here? Deleting an item. What is this one? Singular item. You may create new items using this action. Bless you. So it takes an item that looks like this. Cool. So that's a lot like a complete. So let's grab it as a template. And when we add an item, we are going to do a post. And it's just to items without an ID. And inside of here, we say the item and the text is going to be text.
Text.
Right. And I could call this new to-do text. I'm going to show you why in a second. Why I use the same variables a lot. So I think now it's time to show you this. Right? So let's see what happens. Blarg. Blarg. There it
Works
is.
so good.
Blarg. Works so good. There it is. All right.
Now let's see all of their list.
Right, but it's showing up at the bottom. Let's see if we can MDN JavaScript reverse. What would happen if we reverse the array?
Everything that was on the bottom would then be populated at the top.
Yeah. So let's go find get items from API. And let's call reverse on data. So right, our data is an array. Let's reverse it.
So easy.
New things on top. Right? So I'll just put the new things on top. The API gives them back in chronological order. I'll just reverse them when I get the state. Cool. Let me show you why. Let me show you why I like calling things like here this to be text and this to be text. So if yeah. So here this would also be text, right?
Yeah.
So new version of JavaScript so smart that if your key and your variable are the same thing, you can just do this.
What?
This says to JavaScript, make a text key equal to the text variable. I can show you this in console. Let's see, let text equal to hello. Let object equal to text. Right? So you don't have to repeat yourself. If your key name and your variable you're going to populate it from are the same, just say the one word. So that means up here, where we did complete status, let's just call this complete, and I can get rid of this. And this will still work. All right, so you're going to see this shorthand in places where you just have an object with a thing in the middle, right? And what it's saying is, item is an object who has a complete key, that's the name of the key, and the value comes from the complete variable. Just put them together, just in case you see that. This is why I have the tendency to use the same name for a variable as another thing. That makes it confusing for you because you got the checked equals the checked with the checked and checked and checked, like why? So I tend to try and use different variable names so you can kind of see the flow. But just know, like, a JavaScripter will write it this way. Since they know that they're going to pass to the API something called complete, that's what they're going to call the variable that feeds it, so they can do this trick. Cool. Cool. We don't need to console log that.
So we were talking about being able to assign a priority to an item?
So the API doesn't support it. So if the API doesn't support it, there's nowhere for it to go. So we can only kind of at this point do things that the API lets us do. Let's do edit. Actually, let's fix this error first. List.js line 9. List.js. Oh, that's item. List.js line 9. Ah, so we need a key. What should I use for my key? I wish I could. I'm going to use the item ID. Right, that's going to uniquely identify that item. Here we go. No more errors. So let's do this first. Rather than have this text, where's the text? Rather than just have this text here as a plain text, just like sitting out loose in the interface, let's turn it into an edit field so that we can see. I want to show you how to make it an edit field, and then I'm going to show you a trick. What I would love to have in this interface is when I click edit, this to turn into an edit field, so that when I type over it and I press enter, it turns back into text.
I need enter on this list.
What's that?
You gotta have enter. It's like
yes.
one of our main things on this list. Enter has to work.
Yes. So let's let's put an input here whose type is text, and the value is going to be this.state.text. What, Gavin? We don't have state. Well, in order for us to have an input that's editable, right, it's something we own and change, therefore we have to maintain state. So anytime you have, meaning we, the component,
Okay.
right, now we're going to be able to type into this text box. Remember when we did weather and we typed and nothing happened? The same thing would happen. If I do this dot props.text, right, I'm going to get text in here.
Because it just keeps repainting.
Repainting the same props. So in order for this to happen, here's what I have to do. I have to have a constructor. Super props. This dot state is, let's make my text this dot props.text. Now, instead of this dot props.text, let's make this state. Okay, cool, but nothing's happening yet. Until I add in on change this dot change text. Let's make a change text function that takes an event, and all it needs to do is this dot set state. Text is the event target value. All right. This is stolen pretty much directly from when we did that weather API one, right? If we're going to have an input box that's going to track its own value, we have to have a state for it. We have to initialize that state to whatever the props were, and then maintain it as we go. right? So the props come in, and we grab a copy of the props from the props text into the state text. So now state text is essentially a copy of the props that came in. And then every time we change the text box, the input box, we call change text. And all change text does is set the state of the text to whatever that input box now has. New text here, right? But nothing's happening yet, right? So when we press enter or when we press edit, we want something to happen. Let's make it work on enter, right? So that should be, there's a couple ways we could do it. Let's do it with on key up. So let's make a new action called on key up. So every time you press a key down, you get an event, and every time you let go of a key, you get an event. That's key down, and when you let go of the key, it's key up. So you can get both. You can get they press the key and then let go of the key. And so you imagine when someone whacks the enter key, you're going to get a down and an up. And the tendency is just for us to do it on key up. So let's say key up is an event.
Would there be any reason to not specifically use key down, or is it just this is the way it's handled?
The other way is we could look at doing on input, which I think we'll get when we press enter, but I'm not 100% sure. And I want to show you key up as well. So we can try that when we're done with this. So that's console log. No, it's any key. So watch this. So I'm going to do is I'm going to console log the event. TEXT. You see I got 4 events. So let's look at the first event. And let's look at the character code. Oh, actually, I think we have to call it key code. We've got to call. So let's call event.keycode. And let's look at what key codes we get. I'm going to type T. Oh, sorry, it's not a function. It's just an attribute, key code. Sorry. TEXT. Those are the ASCII characters. Those are the numerical representations of those letters, right? The ASCII codes. Not SASCII codes, ASCII codes.
What does ASCII stand for?
American Standard something interchange. American Standard Character Interchange Format?
American Standard Code.
Is that what it is? Yeah. American Standard Information Interchange. Yeah. American Standard Code for Information Interchange. So let's look up ASCII table. ASCIItable.com. How handy. Right? So it'll just tell you every character that has an ASCII code. So you'll notice that these only go to 127. Why 127? Nope. Yeah. What's special about 127? Think about where we start counting from. 100. So what's special about 128? It's a power of 2. 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128. They're powers of 2. You're going to see a lot of 64s, 128s, 256s, 512s, 1024s, 2048s, 4096s, 16384s, 65 535s. Anything that are these powers of 2, these numbers are going to start to become familiar. You're going to start seeing them in places. So this is the number of characters that can be represented in 4 bits, or half of a byte.
I see.
Right? A full byte would be 256 different characters.
And that's 8 bits.
Sorry, no, this is not 4 bytes. This is 7 bits. Sorry, 7 bits. It's 7 bits, right? Because 8 bits would be 256. 7 bits would be 128. Half of that. So it's 7 bits of an 8-byte character. So let's see if we can figure out. Wow, right here, 13 is a carriage return. Oh.
Are you saying that 8 bits is twice 7 bits?
Yes. Remember? 0 or 1.
Oh.
Right? If I say something can be a 0 or 1, there are 2 possibilities. If I say this is a 0 or 1, or this is a 0 or 1, there's 4 possibilities. 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0, 1, 1. So every time you add 1 more bit, you are doubling the number of possibilities.
Okay.
Yep. Carriage return is the same as enter.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
So we should be able to say here, if the event key code is 13, console.log enter.
I'm afraid to use this every time.
So let's see what happens now. TEST enter. All right. So now what we can do is we can come up here and call a function called change item text.
Wait, it's called carriage return?
Yes.
Still?
So
That's funny.
So right, there's carriage return and line feed. Carriage return is 10 and carriage return is 13 and 10 is line feed. So we still have carriage return and line feed. So in some terminals, carriage return just literally moves the cursor to the beginning, and line feed moves it one down. So you'll see, like for instance, Windows is a carriage return and line feed system. So you'll get 2 bytes. You'll get a carriage return and a line feed. Most ones just have the new line.
I think it's funny that those terms are still used.
Yes. Yep. It's the same fact why we still have it's from typewriters. So let's have the change item text take 2 things. Let's have it take the ID and the text. And let's go look up how the OneList API, where's the change? Create items. It's a put, right? Oh, it's just like checking and unchecking, right? It's just like this, right? It's just like check, but instead of having no, it's exactly the same, right? And instead of complete, text.
Oh.
Right? So let's pass this down. Change item text is this dot change item text. Right? Let's pass Chagnay. Let's pass that function down to our list. Let's pass that down. Then finally in the item, let's call this dot props dot change item text. Let's pass it the ID. And then let's pass it the new text, which is this dot state dot text. Right. So the same thing, I'm making a function up in where my state is, next to my state, which happens to be my app, right, called change item text. And I'm passing that from my app to my list, from my list to my item. Then the item, when I get a character 13, I'm going to scream enter and pass that up. Right? I'm going to pass that to change item text. I'm going to give them the ID and the text. It's expecting an ID and a text, and it's calling put against the API for that ID and passing that item text. So I'm using my little shorthand ES6 syntax. So let's see what happens. Blarg, new blarg. Enter. Right? Cool. Cool. Wow. Such text.
So the next step
Amazing.
is to hit the edit button.
Yes.
And have the text turn into the input.
Bingo. Let's do that.
Ooh.
Okay. Cool. So we have both things here, right? We have the text and we have the input, right? We have the text. So let's put this text in a span. So we have an object for it. Yeah. That's kind of like what programming is most of the time. It's weird and confusing, but you kind of like it. So let's do this. Let's hide the input button unless we're editing. Let's have a new state called editing. Editing. And let's set this to false. So by default, we're going to have a state that says, hey, here's the text, but we're not editing yet. So down here, what I can have is const plain text be, let's just move this span here up here. What happened? Let's delete this and paste it here. So I can make a variable equals that span. That's something we can do in JSX. And down here I can just say, put the plain text here. Right? So what I can now do is I can use my state and my little ternary trick. This dot state dot editing. If we're editing, then I want to show nothing. Otherwise, I want to show text. So down here, if we're editing, I want to show nothing. If this dot state editing true. Oh wait, if we're editing, right, editing by default is false. Bless you. If the it's editing, this is false. Oh, so if we're editing, then we don't want to see it, right? Otherwise we do. Okay, this is fine. Now, let's do another one. Let's make our input. Let's paste this in. So let's put the input down here. Now our input's going to be this.state.editing. Yes, let's show the input. Otherwise, let's show nothing.
That's the shorthand for if else?
Yes, it's a ternary if else. So if this is true, mark, otherwise you get the thing after the colon. And here null is just nothing. I could have used an empty string. We can also use null. So prepare to be amazed. On click equals this dot set editing. A function that when we click on the edit button, yeah, set editing is a function that takes an event and calls this dot set state editing true.
Monster.
Right? Even better, what if I do not this dot state dot editing? So by default, editing is what? What's not false? True. When editing is true, what's not true? False. So what do you think is going to happen when I click on edit?
Oh my god.
Now, what do you think is going to happen if I hit edit again?
What if you enter? Yeah, so what if once you're done doing the type, you just enter will go away?
No, but super simple. So simple. This dot set state editing is false.
So is there a way to,
Wow, React is so cool. Enter.
by that same token, if we navigate away from the selection of like that editing pane?
Ah, cool. So what happens if we do tab away? Let's make this also finish it. So also, in addition to on key up, where's our on key up? It's up here. On key up, we can also have on blur. This dot blur. So blur is the event when you leave a field. It's blurring. Cool. Yeah. So let's up here have a, what do we call it? On, did I call it on blur?
Yeah.
On, no, I just called it blur. Blur. Blur is a function that takes an event and just calls these two things. Here's what I'm going to do. Actually, let's call this do change. Do change is a function that has this. If you event code 13, this dot do change, and if you blur, do change. Right, because I don't want to repeat the code. So remember, this code used to be up here, right? This code used to be up here. This is what we had before, right? When we edit this and we type, we press enter, that happens. When we edit, what we want to have happen is when we tab away, we want it to happen. So I have a blur function, right? On blur, we call this dot blur, and we said that blur is the tab away. So blur is a function that takes an event and does the thing, right? Console.log blur. Good. All right. Let's edit this. Let's type 13 and press tab. Blur. Right?
Where's your gut?
Where's the gut?
Oh,
Whoa, what? 13. Oh, there it is.
Wait, why isn't it?
I must have caught it between saves. So I want to do the same code, right? So I could just copy pasta this down here, and this will still work. 13 tab, right? Or 42, click over here, right? As soon as I lose focus of that field, right? Fancy. Enter. Right?
That's interesting how
Cool.
you can see the old one
Yes,
and then it
because we are turning off the state before it comes through. What we could potentially do is let's see what happens if we don't set the editing to false. I'm curious what happens. So fancy. Enter. Yeah. So we're receiving new props because I bet if we reload this, so fancy. So what we could do is we could say something like component will receive new props. Props. I think this is it. So that's console.log new props. So I think when we edit this, 13, is it React lifecycle props? What's the function name? Component will receive props, not new props. Component will receive props. So what we can see is, hey, is this 13 going to become a 42? New props. So what we can ask here is, if the props text is not equal to my this.props.text, then we can console.log props be changing. Right? I meant 2.
What is the difference?
2 equals on a not is like a 3 equals.
Oh, right.
So it's like a not 3 equals.
Right. So we haven't learned what 2 equals to.
Yeah, I will lecture that at some point. So let's edit this person and say 13 props be changing. So at the moment that the props are changing, what do we want to do? This dot set state editing false. So let's change the editing to false when we're getting new props. This should take away the little bit of text. This is new text here. Enter. Right? So we don't turn off the editing state right away. We wait until the app tells us, hey, new
It's
properties are flowing back. I'm about to show the new properties, so immediately take away the editing. So that little flash of unstyled stuff doesn't show up.
I know you're talking about delay when you put in the checkbox.
Mm-hmm.
That's the delay. That's because it's running back from the API again.
Yep.
Is there a way to fix that?
Yes, what we could do is we could modify our own state and send the request to the API and receive a copy of the state. So some programs will do that. They will modify their own state, send the request to the API, retrieve a new copy of that state, which is identical, and this way it becomes a do nothing. So some apps will modify their own state, hoping that the API will give them back a good response. The challenge is we then also have to handle the error. Like, what happens if one list said no to our change, right? So what if, what if that checkbox we couldn't uncheck for some reason, right? So we would want to like click that button and wait for the round trip from the API to say, yes, we've accepted that you can turn this off. Maybe once Alan finishes a to-do, Gavin can't complete it. So it just depends on what your flow is. So this is cool. That's interesting. The works so. Oh, so but see now it is like when we click away.
It's not doing the blur.
Right, it's not doing the blur because we're only doing this if the text changes. So let's just set the editing state to false all the time. So if we edit and we click away, yeah, there we go. So we're just gonna change that editing state no matter what, even if the text isn't changing. Cool. What if we didn't want this to be on the edit button? Let's get rid of the edit button and let's just put the on click right here inside of the text. Oh, we have an error. What's my error? Oh, except it's on the input. It's not on this. It's on the span. That's where the on change goes. On change is this dot set editing. Oh, it's not on change. It's on click.
Oh my word.
Right. Cool. Let's go into our index CSS and let's make any LIs that have an input whose type is text. Let's make the cursor a pointer. Why would we do that?
So they know that
Mhm.
so when they scroll over, it's some kind of interaction and see.
Oh boy.
Oh, it's not a type text. It is an li span. Span. So now it looks like it's clickable. What? Sweet. Oh, except we have a little bit of a problem now. Now the problem is when I'm clicking on the input.
Oh yeah, now it doesn't.
Why is that? Oh, because I also have it on the input. I don't mean it for this to be on the input.
Oh, you moved it to the
I moved it to the span. So now when I click here, cool. Wow. Oh, you know what okay, here's what I did. I lost my on change. This dot.
You still need the on change in the
I
input
do.
so that it's typable, but you need the on click so that when you click the span, it's editable.
This dot change text. I got 2 delete happy. Finally, cool. Do we have this? Click. Wow. Amaze. Enter.
Yes.
Click here. Wow. So nice. Click away. All right. That did not take a whole lot. Think about just for a moment how much DOM, query selector, add event listener, functions with variables, blah, blah, blah you'd have. I know this seems hard, but just for a moment, think about how hard this would have been to do that first week that we learned JavaScript and DOM manipulation, right? When we change our minds to thinking about our application, it's tough to think about it this way. This view is nothing but the human version of the state objects, right? If our brains were enough that we could edit that state object directly, we wouldn't need user interfaces, right? But normal humans can't just look at a JavaScript object and be like, cool, that's where I changed the thing to change the to-do item.
Okay.
So React is doing nothing but taking that object and using map and events to turn that JavaScript object into a user interface, right? This user interface is just that JavaScript object with some little event handlers and mapping into DOM that we're able to see.
So what you're saying is that what we see over here on our list is just a way for somebody to basically affect our code through that
Our state.
interface, our state through this interface because they don't know how to do it through the actual
Yeah.
code.
Yeah, so like when I'm clicking this checkbox, right? And I'm changing. Well, better yet, when I'm clicking on this, right? What am I changing? I'm changing editing from false to true. You can see this if we go into React. And let's find one of these list items. Let's find the very first one. That's easy to find. Actually, let's find this one. All right, so here's test 2. Let's look at our props. Right, our props are some functions. We know that if we toggle this, right, we're not actually changing it in the API. We're just changing the props on this object. So it's just reflecting the properties. If I turn editing on, I turn editing off. All the user interface is doing is reflecting the state of this editing variable.
Is that state there by default through the API?
We did that up here.
Okay.
Yeah, so the editing has there's no editing element of the API. We've added that state. So your state can be a combination of what comes from the API plus things that you add. So the text comes from the props. The props came from our parent, from the list. The list got them from the items. They float all the way down. But editing, that's all us, whether or not we're affecting that. Right? So right, we're just toggling this. And if we toggle the complete, we're toggling that. Like we can put it into like a weird state where it's complete and we're editing, right? The user doesn't have that ability. Oh, actually, you know what? We can. Let's do that. Let's stop it from being able to do that. If this dot props dot completed dot complete return. If we are complete, do not let us edit. So yep, right, and I should also not be able to do this with no, I still can do it here. I can change the state here, right, but I can't change the state through the interface.
So if you down the React console or like the React bar down there, if you changed it to like incomplete, can you then go into there, like change it, and that would affect the API?
If I called the function to post, I would. I have to call the function. Okay. So the interface is only reflecting the props and the state, and I can go in and tweak them, but unless I call the function, right, change text item or call the complete item function, only by calling this, I don't know if there's a way for me to call it. I don't think there's a way to execute it. But only if I call this will it send anything to the API. So I can like tweak the status all day long, but the event isn't firing. That's calling the function. That's calling the API. That's refreshing my state. So I'm kind of just tweaking the UI. It's kind of like going into the DOM and changing the elements. It's not changing your text, like in your editor. This is kind of just changing it live without calling the functions. Let's make the text when it's, let's see if we can make the text when it's crossed out. Where's the?
Are we going to finish our footer with the current date and time?
Yeah, let's make the text, let's make the color here light gray. Nope, let's make the color just a plain old gray. Anybody find a fun gray color to use? That's good.
Fun and gray.
Yeah.
That's for my babies.
Cool. So we wanted the footer to be the current date and time. Cool. Let's do that. That's in the app, right?
Yes.
So let's extract the footer into its own thing. So let's make a new file called footer.js. Oops. What is it? IMC. Oh my goodness, I don't have it. So we're gonna steal it. Yeah, I haven't installed it. The React tools bits. So it's a class footer extends component export default footer. And then let's return a footer made with
Simple React.
start. Why is that? What's that complaining about?
So you don't need it in any kind of
We shouldn't have to.
we have all of the information.
Comma expected.
You don't need a render in there? Just
Oh, you're right. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm missing the render function. Yes, thank you. There we go. That looks better. And then let's import
There you go. Cool.
footer from footer. And then let's replace this footer with a footer.
Doesn't matter. I saw you put that above the axes.
Yeah, I tend to have, the pattern I've seen is import your React stuff, then your individual components, then your libraries last. That's just this I've seen. You're going to find different teams have different ways to organize those. You probably wouldn't have import the app, and then the list, then the Axios, then the footer. It's going to be grouped in some way, right? React, because we're doing React, then my CSS, then all my components, then my libraries, or all my libraries up top, and then my stuff below. Cool. Let's go into the footer. And let's put, what's today's date? Today is October the 2nd, 2018, at about 3:08 p.m. Cool. So let's make this in a function. Let's say render current time. That's going to be a function. That's going to be a function that just returns this.